What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex, and in this video, and I promise this is probably the last time we're going to do this, want to talk about Wonder Woman one more time, but want to talk about this interesting angle that I've seen several websites kind of run with, and I thought, where are they getting this info from? And turns out, this Jason Schreier kind of funny interview that we've referenced, done multiple videos on at this point. There's one interesting part to it that I did not see up until, this point, and it's certainly the narrative is basically that the other failures of WB Games is kind of contributed to the Wonder Woman thing. Now, look, I mean, we've talked about it in like 3, 4, 5 videos. We know generally what happened. We know, at least in my opinion, that, it's not as simple as just one or two things, right? Like, you lose the leadership team and the game takes forever. And the first couple years, they don't have a leadership team. Then the game gets rebooted and it just takes so long. It has taken so long. And maybe WB looks at it and says, like, what in God's name is going on here? Or, maybe the game is just not in a functioning state, or maybe the game is really good and they're just dumb. And I mean, there's a lot that can go on. There's a lot, I think, that just in general contributed to that. So I think to play it safe, the narrative for all of this should probably be that it was a contributor, right? The other failures did contribute, but how much? How much at the end of the day? They didn't really go into it. We can speculate, but that part wasn't all that clear. So here's what Jason Schreier specifically said. He said, but by then it was kind of too late, especially because last year was so bad for WB Games organization. Last year, Suicide Squad was a humongous flop. They wrote off $200 million because of that. Multiverses and Quidditch Champions, also both flops. They wrote off another $100 million because of that. Now, by the way, I think that's from the interview, but I'm almost positive that he wrote things like that before. I mean, look, it's not for sure. It's not the first time we've heard about the failures of those other games. We definitely knew that they had to, write off some expenses for Suicide Squad's failures, and then I believe also Multiverses and Quidditch. So he might just be saying it again. I don't know if those are kind of like updated figures or anything, but may I just say, okay, again, it's more intricate. We covered all those bases, right? If we're just talking about this part right now, which we should do for this video, what a failure. What an absolute, this is what happens, I think, and this really contributes to other things we talked about. This is what happens when just your entire organization is so dysfunctional, right? And, we've talked about my worry for Hogwarts Legacy. And in fact, on the weekend, I'm going to be talking about Hogwarts Legacy 2. I've said 1,000 times, I'll say it again. What if Hogwarts Legacy did not happen? In fact, this actually makes me more scared, or actually, maybe not even scared because it's like a what if. This makes me more curious, right? Because if these other games contributed to basically putting Monolith under a microscope and saying, all right, can we save a little bit of money here because we've lost so many hundreds of millions? If that happened just because of what I just read, what if Hogwarts Legacy didn't contribute like a billion plus dollars of that game made so much money, right? An unbelievable amount of money. If you take that revenue from WB Games, they are so broke and they are so non-profitable or whatever word you want to say. They have no money, literally no. So what do they even do? So again, it's not really fear, but it's almost like, man, in a what-if parallel dimension, I almost want to see Hogwarts just not sell. Not because I didn't like it, not because I didn't support it, because both those things are false, but just to kind of see what would have happened, right? Like what happens if they didn't make that money? They probably sell like every studio. They probably license everything out. Maybe they want to keep the properties to themselves. It's an interesting thing to go down that road. But no, in terms of this, again, that dysfunction, it sucks. It sucks, truly, that Suicide Squad hurt not just that game, not just the legacy of Rocksteady, not just the legacy of the Arkham franchise, not just being not that good of a game in general, but also it did all four. I think that's 4 individual things. It also did a 5th thing, which is hurt other games in the same. How bad you have to be. And look, by the way, I'm sure this does happen. We've heard with like Shuhei Yoshida with PlayStation, right? That PlayStation, part of the reasons they do remasters and remakes and stuff, generally remasters, is they're cheap. They're cheap and they basically print money, right? So they do these remasters. They put it on PC. We heard from him talk about like the Chinese audience, right? And he literally said it's like printing money. So the reason I bring this up, we've almost seen the reverse. We see studios that kind of rely on certain things to fund other things, right? So PlayStation kind of relies on these cheaper older recycled type things, which are fine, but not, I mean, it's getting actually a lot of people more and more mad, but they rely on these things to help support other stuff. So that's making money and then using it to benefit something else. So as much as we might not love like the actual choices, the strategy does seem to work, right? Okay, well, this is actually the exact opposite. This is studios that sell so poorly, hurt the company so much that now you have to do a double take and say, okay, not only did you ruin yourself and you got one more chance, but also now we have to start looking at other, because you might have actually just shut that other studio down with how bad your game is. Now, again, okay, some of that's exaggerating. At the end of the day, I don't want to put the full blame on Suicide Squad because, we've talked in 3 or 4 other videos of all of the other probable issues with Wonder Woman and the history and WB management and all that stuff. There's also just like a structure, I think, issue. We talk, with Superman and going down the live service stuff and what their priorities. It's a priority issue. I would actually maybe reword it. There's a lot of other things. You know what I mean? Also, may I just say, the multiverses thing is kind of sad because, that game started so hot in the alpha like 2-3 years ago or whatever, and then they took it offline and to get the full version. They never, by the way, in like hindsight, looking back, they never should have done that. So that was probably their biggest mistake. But that does suck because I actually did really like that game, and I think that game had a lot of potential. And then Quidditch, there's 2 things actually I want to say with Quidditch. Number one, the game's actually good, and I mean, yes, I think they gave me a code, so maybe legally I should say it, but I think that game is a great game. I was a big supporter of it leading into it, and I think still to this day it is a good game. That's the first thing I want to say. Second thing, though, is like it never came off across as like being the biggest thing of all time. Like maybe when it was first announced, I talked it up and I thought it had potential to be big, but like this, follow me here. The scale of the company, like the studio that made it, right? Unbroken Studios. That studio, how long it took them to make the game, like how did it cost? That's my main thing. It was not this gigantic 500-person studio. It didn't take them 8 years. This is a game that really the budget should not. So when I think about, okay, they took $100 million loss on Multiverses and Quidditch. Is it like 80-20? Or, like Multiverses, they lost so, because probably, maybe, because Multiverses, I think, had kind of more going for it, probably had the bigger team, bigger marketing, bigger push. And then, like, it probably did worse for that gap, right? Like, what they thought it was going to do versus what it did. I imagine Multiverses was the bigger one. And I'm not saying, like, one's worse than the other. I mean, they're 2 very different types of games. And I have my own personal biasness, but it doesn't really matter. For Quidditch, I just don't get it. Like, how you lost significant, course-altering money off of Quidditch, I just don't understand, because it just never seemed like it needed to even do. Like, did it sell? I mean, it was on PS Plus, right? So, or PlayStation Plus. So maybe that hurt it. It probably did, to be honest. It hurt the sales because maybe the majority of people played it through that. I don't know. But I don't know. Like, did the game sell like 100,000 units and need to sell like 1 million? Okay, that's a good gap, right? But I don't know. I feel like Multiverses probably did worse for what they wanted versus Quidditch. But either way, right? You got these 2 or 3 studios, 3 games. One of them is like in a retooling period, Unbroken. God knows what's going on there. And then the studio that made Multiverses is also shut down. So I guess these things do lead somewhere, right? You lose all of this money. And again, I think, like I keep saying, I think it's just snowballing. I think it's just multiple reasons. You lose $300 million in like a year plus period, okay? In your gaming division alone, just your gaming division, and you look and you say, we cannot do that again. So not only do we have to make decisions on those studios and those games, but we also need to start looking at like what we can do elsewhere. And then we have all of the drama and all of the history with Monolith and the Wonder Woman game. And I feel like that's probably how it went. Just sad. Just, again, like another part to this entire chapter, right? So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Make sure, as always, you're subscribed to the channel, bell icon turned on, and I hope to see you all on the next one.